to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fawcett. Each week we interview experts in AI, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. In our show today, we look at AI and the customer journey. I'm joined by Jeff Nicholson, industry veteran, several decades in AI before it was called AI, CRM, process automation space for several decades. And he had a hand in creating a bunch of different categories across technology segments. Jeff, welcome.
Great to be here, Michael. Great to be back. Yep.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you joining today. We're going to talk about AI because, we always talk about AI on the show. But before we kind of jump into the AI piece of it, I kind of wanted to start by setting the groundwork a little bit around this concept of customer journey. And I know it's a term we use all the time, but I'm not sure we all, think about it in the same way. So I'm curious, how do you think of it? How useful do you think it is? Are there pitfalls, shortcomings around it? And then just in general, how do companies improve it?
Well, I think it's an interesting and hot topic, especially when we're talking about the concept of AI, which is a lot of hype, a lot of noise. And many are looking for, what's the practical application? And I see a lot of vendors that make it seem like you just turn on their system and it automatically will solve customer journey. The customer journey is an interesting thing because if you really have an outside-in perspective, maybe that journey touches you a few times if you're lucky. And it may touch your marketing if you're lucky. There's a lot of research that is happening on the part of the consumer and buyer today that's not involving you whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it might touch your marketing, it might touch your sales touch points, autonomous touch points that are selling, even humans in the mix, they still exist. And
Yeah.
if you're successful in making that sale, customer service, customer support functions, billing functions, and the journey is cutting across all of these things. And if you take a step back and look at how enterprises are set up, they're not really set up as one big thing.
Right.
That's why solving journey is so hard. And when you throw AI in the mix, I'm seeing in many cases AI being deployed in isolation in a silo, doing one small thing pretty well, but it doesn't really cut across the journey. And Michael, you and I have talked about journey in past around the concept of journey maps, as if you could just put it on a piece of paper and then it's done.
Yeah, I never could figure out a way to get the customers to follow my map. Right. You hit on another thing too that I think is really important as we carry into the AI conversation too. The silos and organizational silos we know are a serious problem when you talk about customers, but the data silos that we've created through the years of all these different systems, I mean, that also has to be a real hindrance to the use of AI in any of these processes, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we're seeing organizations try and get their heads around this. And they were forced a few years back in many cases to start thinking about their data from a governance perspective in a different way due to legislation like the GDPR, CCPA. Where is the data? Where is it held? For how long? Where is the PII? Where do we have to redact it and de-identify it for use cases? Where is it should be used and not used? And so many businesses, thankfully, had a running start, but now that they were pushed right to the to the race line when it comes to AI, and masses of questions that organizations have to solve for here when it comes for bias in your models. Are you using data that you should be using it in the right way? So yeah, all that should be top of mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, as you start to think about AI and generative AI, which is obviously the topic of the year, what are the most exciting, promising ways that you're seeing companies use these tools to build a better digital experience, enhance the customer journey?
Well, there are quite a number of them happening now, and I think what we should be looking for are those practical use cases. There are things that will happen someday at scale, but what are things today? And we touched on marketing, we touched on sales, we touched on customer service, and I think there's use cases in each of these. Probably good to start with the marketing side. And one of the areas is kind of in the personalization zone, but not the kind that we've talked about in the past. Personalization has been around several decades, right, Michael? And starting from "Dear, insert your name here" in an email, and that was thought to.
Yeah.
By the way, I still get those, Michael. I don't know if you.
I do too. Believe me.
Yeah. So that's still out there, but then we got more clever, and we said, "Oh, this offer the offer of the week, and then we said, well, this offer is for you, but it's the same offer we offered everybody else in that segment. And maybe we customize the image to be because you clicked on Italy. Here's a picture of Italy, and that's all great stuff. Where I think it's going, Michael, is toward real individualization.
Mhm.
And it is not just the marketing message that's going to be shaped here.
Okay.
What are your thoughts, Michael?
Well, I mean, you hit on I love the word individualization, and I've kind of bounced that around in my head for years when I think of personalization, because when you, I always have this story about one of our large online retailers, that I'm a photographer. I buy high end photography equipment, and I've done that through this retailer and others for years. But one time I bought a Christmas present for my mom. It was a little $149 point and shoot camera. So now almost every day, at least weekly, I get an offer of, here's our most popular, little cameras. Here's another $119, $149 thing that you must want because one time 10 years ago you bought one.
Right.
And I that drives me crazy actually, because they have lots of data. Why don't they use it, right?
And that's generally the attitude. If more and more customers are aware that you have their data, they're expecting it to at least use it to help them along that path. And if
Yeah.
you get it wrong enough, they're going to take that right back.
Yeah,
And
I mean that's the value proposition is I let you use my data. I'm supposed to get something back, right?
well, precisely. So AI is one of those areas that you can apply it to help you down that path. And really, there's some examples I'll give. And if you look at how marketing teams are using AI today, they might be using it to help them summarize content, right? To help them
Mm,
write an abstract and take an ebook and boil it down to a nice little subject line. That's great stuff. But where it really has the opportunity to help is actually taking it a step further to that individualization you talked about. And consider that even the products that we're offering can change in that marketing message. So think about an individual that may be clicking on sport coats, might be clicking on everything blue, not buying, and moving through the site, and you're leaving those behavior, those footprints that you talked about, Michael. But we're just presenting the same things that we may or may not have in stock, frankly.
right.
Where it's going to go, I believe, is to the era of actually wrapping that product around it. What if you actually could show that sport coat in blue with texture, because everything that the person's clicked it had texture, and it doesn't have 3 buttons, it has 2 because everything has had 2. And for some reason, they're always clicking on a jacket with no pocket on it. Well, that doesn't exist.
Mhm.
But with this technology, there's AI that can actually generate that image. And the Firefly are things that we're using today. Stable Diffusion is another one, Michael.
Mhm. I mean, the data, we have lots of data, and I mean, like we have new some of the product analytics kind of companies like Amplitude have behavioral databases, and they track all these different breadcrumbs across the whole interaction that you may do there, and frankly, intent data from across the web, so you get it from other places
Mhm.
too. So it does seem like a logical time that we could now take that data and have an engine that can really individualize that for each of the customers as they go across that experience,
Well,
which is exciting, frankly.
it absolutely is exciting. And it's using it to wrap it around you. That individualization, it's not just a marketing message. So
Mm,
again, that sport code example, the product is built for you. It might take you 14 days to get it. And by the way, brands are doing, Converse is letting, my daughter just ordered one, letting you design
mm,
your own shoe, but you
yeah,
design it. This
yep,
is where using those digital footprints at mass scale, you can produce these imagery using generative AI for image, not just text alone.
yeah,
We're multimodal in many ways here,
yeah.
and present that. And what makes this super interesting to me as a lifelong marketer is that when you think about the things that you can sell then next at mass, your system should alert you if it spots trends in these
Mhm.
customs. And then you can spin it full circle into your segmentation strategies
Mm.
yet again, and rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat.
Well, I mean, you hit on another thing too. I mean, that actually even ties back into the back end of the business, right? To the supply chain or manufacturing or whatever it might be, depending on the business. You could actually start to predict demand of different types of items or variations of items, right? Colors or textures or whatever, and actually make sure that you have that just in time and save both on overhead and also improve customer satisfaction. I mean,
Absolutely. And
yeah, that's amazing.
you use it for good, not evil, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I was reading something this morning. One of the conversational, you know, sales tools that people use, Gong, announced that they've now added a generative AI capability that improves forecasting by, I forget their number, but maybe it was 30% or something, because they're taking the data that they're collecting in all those conversations and across all of the conversations for all those years and abstracting that into ways to predict. I mean, it seems like that from a sales perspective, some type of tools that make the salesperson more effective would be a really important place to focus when you look at AI and the ways you could use it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm seeing, and that's where I think the hot spot is when it comes to sales automation technologies. We're seeing kind of two hemispheres happening. One is on the productivity of the seller, and I'm seeing a lot of that, where you can use Gen AI to, for example, summarize the conversation. You can use it to extract action items and meeting notes, schedule meetings, and things like that. And those are, hugely helpful, but they're kind of party tricks in some sense, right?
Yeah, yeah,
They're helping you do what you should be doing anyway. They're just giving your time back. And my question is, what are you doing with that time? How do you change your outcome? And that's what the example that you just shared. I think that's why I think it's so interesting, because you can use AI to actually shape what you are doing materially to affect outcome. The next
yeah. I
question.
like I like that idea that you sort of have two paths with AI. One part is what can I do that removes friction from that person's role, their process, whatever, right? So that's automation and like you said, summarization, data entry, all those things that people shouldn't really have to spend their time on when I want them to sell. And then the other half is what do you do to give them better insights into what they're doing so they can focus correctly and make better decisions, right?
Absolutely. And in the example you gave was a good one, where the AI is learning at scale what happens to be working and not working.
Yep.
And then really surfacing that to you to make you more effective, not just efficient. And that's where I think the real holy grail is. And if it can only be wrapped around that journey that we talked about, using
Yeah.
those footprints and doing it right.
Well, so we're talking a bit about the customer, and I think that's really important. But I just wonder if you turn the lens around a little bit and look inside too. And I guess one of the things we mentioned, the automation idea or removing friction, that probably does improve the employee experience. But how are businesses doing that? Like, are they applying Gen AI internally to improve the employee experience as well? I mean, how does that play into that and CX? I mean, how does that play into interaction with the customer?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm starting to see that. And if you think about, the employee experience is part of the customer's journey. They are not just touching autonomous touch points; they're touching employee touch points, and they're going to have to surface insights to you from their enterprise applications, and by the way, for themselves, just in their daily life.
Right.
And today, they're interacting with one application at a time. That's one of the major differences. And today, they're querying something specific and surfing to try and somehow find a needle in the haystack in the data. In the future, they're not just going to be clicking; they're going to be conversing. And I'm starting to see the applications emerge. And conversational AI platforms are out there.
Yeah.
Let you actually have a conversation. What I think is probably the most interesting part, Michael, is that the conversation doesn't happen only necessarily with a single application, but it can happen across it. You could be asking, how much time, if I don't take my time off through the year end, how much will I get back after taxes, considering the following things? There's no system that's got that ready to go, but it can.
No.
So,
No, or even what, if I change this in my process, what does this do? Or if I, whatever, can I get rid of some of this data entry work or have an assistant that does things? I mean, that to me, that seems like that would make a big difference for the employee. And then if you took that into the customer service world, and you can literally give an assistant to that employee that would help them solve customer problems faster, or actually, be a part of the process. That also seems like that improves both. It improves the employee experience and the customer experience.
Oh, without a doubt. And for years, we've tried to surface kind of custom scripts into the screen for someone to read, some of it dynamic, on logic. But now Gen AI can actually surface something more meaningful. And even just think about knowledge articles and how they've typically been, and your frontline employees trying to speak to a customer at the very same time as they're reading content. Yeah, it's 13 pages long.
Yeah.
It's just a challenging job.
Yeah.
So if you can use Gen AI to summarize that, not just the article, but in the context of the customer query that's at hand right now, and here's what I think the issue is, then we're talking about something more magical.
Yeah, I mean, I think the industry standard is that a chat customer support person on chat can handle, I don't know, a good one can handle 3 to 5 interactions at a time. I mean, to me, I always thought that was crazy. Like, I couldn't barely do one interaction at a time. But if I was trying to read things and figure out how to solve a problem, I mean, that could make a huge difference in my ability to manage that many interactions at once.
Well, absolutely. And so it's not just what you can do at the same time, in my view, Michael, it's how you do it. And
Yeah.
we wrap it around the journey. And, in all these different forms of Gen AI will be able to help visual, audio, text-based,
Mhm.
all these multimodal emerging approaches that are popping up. And
Mhm.
your ability to understand the context, wrap it around the customer is one of the major game changers that's coming.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things that as I was thinking about marketing, one of the things I was curious about, and obviously from your perspective as a practitioner, how how do you keep, because you've got tools that generate emails, and you've got email campaigns, and you've got campaigns on social, and you've got ebooks and content marketing and all this stuff. How do you keep the brand consistent? I mean, is that something that we're worried about from a it seems to me like that could go in all sorts of crazy directions.
You nailed it. And this is one of the greatest challenges and opportunities when it comes to Gen AI. And when you consider now, effectively anybody can generate content from
Mhm.
across systems. The danger is that's just getting created and sent over the hill to your market, to your customer, without the checks and balances in place. Is it hallucinating? Is it right? Is it in our brand tone?
Mhm.
And actually, there's a wonderful analyst at Gartner named Andrew Frank that has been doing some really forward-looking thinking around the subject of brand. And he believes that it's not only going to be able to help you police that brand as content is going out the door and understanding where things are on and off in terms of tone, in terms of color, in terms of sharpness of image, all these types of interesting things.
Mm.
As it generates content, it knows how to keep it in tone with your brand tone in a way, frankly, you could never even think of doing before at scale.
Mm. So it actually lets you set guardrails that could increase the consistency in a way that you probably never could have done, even in one team, let alone across all the organizational silos that you're talking about that do touch the customer uh, today. I mean, that's yeah.
It's always been
That,
a challenge. It's always been a challenge, Michael, for marketing teams with content going out the door in all different directions, being created at all points across the organization. Now, AI both is making that exponential, so creating almost a bigger problem, but it's also introducing a solution that we've never
mm,
had.
yeah, that makes sense. So that kind of brings me to another question, and this just sort of hit me, and I know for a while CDPs, customer data platforms have been a big thing. People talk about them a lot. But every time I look at them, for the most part, now this is starting to change, I hope, they were talking about it from as a marketing tool. I mean, do you think that CDPs play a role in this from an AI perspective? Do they give you the capability perhaps to overcome some of these silos? And is that the right sort of way to think about it?
Well, there's some debate around the lifespan of CDPs and kind of where it's heading. I
Mm,
think ultimately it's around taking step back and saying, what is the data we have? What's the data we have a right to use? Uh, and what does the customer expect us to have? And how do we use that ethically in a way that's
mm,
proper for that customer, respecting PII, respecting all the different things we should be respecting, and having a system of governance in place across all the data sources. And
mm.
it's a major challenge. I wish there
Yeah.
was just a magic wand to that, but it's one that every CIO is going to have to face.
Yeah. Well, one of my guests not long ago, we were talking about compliance and regulations and governance and that sort of thing. And one of the things he said that I thought was a really good lesson for the audience, and I'll share it with you, see what you think. But his statement really was companies have to be intentional about that governance and compliance process up
Mhm.
front. So as they're planning what they're going to do, they need to include that strategy at the time versus we have this thing working and now, oops, we need to we need to figure out a way to comply. And it seems like a simple thing, but it also seems like something that probably is a thing that would be missed.
It can easily be missed. And whenever you're thinking about data, what's interesting when you think about it is you don't need to use all the data all the time.
Right.
You need to use specific sets of data for specific use cases. So I always think about, if you take a step back, what is the use case that you're even thinking of, and
Mhm.
how would it really impact the trajectory of that customer journey if you only could? And then what data do you need? And we just make sure you're focusing on the right problem.
Yeah. I mean, that again, that makes sense, and it seems like that could tie into best practices. And so, like, in fact, that's probably a good place to go next is to think about across those different functions. I mean, what are some of the best practices that you're seeing today for people that are integrating generative AI and AI systems into their customer management systems?
Well, a couple. First and foremost, is actually getting in the game. So not putting your head in the sand. Your
Mhm.
competition is doing these things to getting more efficient, more effective. But you don't have to solve it all at once, and you can't. And the technology is changing. You couldn't possibly, frankly, Mike, right? The technology changes so fast. We've already blown past GPT-3, well into
Mhm.
GPT-4, and on. And now there's Google Bard. There's other types of approaches that are just
Yep.
exploding across everywhere. And you can't be an expert in absolutely everything all the time. And so don't be overwhelmed by it, but get started. And the way I think about these, you need to be implementing systems of trust. And that's trust in the systems from an employee standpoint so that you can achieve trust in what you're doing from a customer journey standpoint. And to
Mhm.
do that, it is about testing and learning. Let's test this out. Let's watch it closely. Make sure in the early days we do have humans in the mix. And I think of it very much like the old days of progressive profiling, not the old days. You should still be doing that.
Yeah, right.
Marketing, where you don't have it out of the gate a complete profile, but progressively you're building it and you're
Mhm.
learning, and you're continually getting a better picture. The same thing is happening over time when you're deploying these AI, where you have the humans in the mix. If you're finding that 100% of the time in this type of a setting, when we're using this AI, it's actually producing uh, the right type of content, and it's low risk.
Mhm.
I can let that
Right.
fly. But these other areas, I'm building confidence. I'm not quite there. And so you need to be able to regulate these things and build systems of
Mhm.
trust over time. And uh, my advice is also not just from an employee standpoint, but also look at it from a customer standpoint. Try, if you can, to get feedback from the content. But my advice is uh, don't go nuclear with it. So I'm talking about thumbs up, thumbs down. How are we doing type stuff.
Right.
I'm not talking about here, complete the survey with a pop up that slammed into your screen. Nobody likes that.
No, no, that's a sure exit strategy for me. If I see that, I'm gone, right? I'm not doing it. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I think it's important to to say that you're collecting feedback and you're going to use that to refine. And I like that particularly in most of the, Gen AI tools that you play with as a consumer. They have that little thumbs up, thumbs down. That's it. It was the answer good or was it not good? And that over time helps it tune and learn and perform better. I think that's really effective, and quick, right? It's frictionless or nearly anyway. So you already sort of hit on a little bit of the advice, right? So you're saying they should be doing it and they should be keeping the humans in the loop until you build trust and that sort of thing. But I'm curious, what else would you say from a standpoint of I'm a business, I'm thinking about jumping in with some of the different customer areas with Gen AI tools. What advice would you give them?
Well, I think start engaging with the various experts that are out there in the industry. There's great thinking coming out of McKinsey, out of Forrester, out of Gartner. Accenture's doing good things, and also challenge your vendors that you trust, and have them share with you and challenge them to tell you what are the things that you should be thinking about when it comes to their technology. They should be closest to it, but they may be biased.
Well, they will be biased, but yes, yeah.
And challenge them for their recommendations, because again, people are coming at this from very ever so slightly different perspectives with different flavors of AI. And what I'm seeing right now, Michael, is that there's no one kind of atomic fly swatter that does everything when it comes to AI. You might guess that a Google might get there someday, or a Meta, but right now, flavors are good for very specific things, and you're often going to take these open source ones and be very concerned with your data privacy, and make your own flavors of it, and then you're going to chain different models together for not just different queries, but even different pieces of a query. So that's why you need to start building up your knowledge internally on it, and again, challenge the vendors that are coming to explain to you where do they believe that they can help you most, and honestly, where not.
Yeah, I like the use of the word trust, and I've seen this now on a few of the enterprise vendors that I've taken a look at that are starting to embed AI in their systems, and like Salesforce calls it a trust layer. Sugar CRM, I did a deep dive with them around their trust layer, and one of the things I've seen is there's a certain amount of automation that's starting to happen in here too. So, like if you're passing information into a model, some companies are using a filter type approach, which just prevents things from going through that filter that you don't want in the model, PII mostly, right? But then the other approach I thought was really novel is having a basically an algorithm that can identify those things and modify them or mask them so that they aren't identifiable, but they still set the context for the model that you'd need to get an even more accurate response. So to me, both of those are obviously useful, and at different times they probably both apply.
Absolutely.
But I like the use of the word trust. I think that's important in this, and I guess the vendors should be able to help with the their customers with that trust layer and trust level as they implement, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And we really saw some early thinking around the subject coming out of Pegasystems, and they put in place T switch, which stood for trust and transparency, on their next best action technology, which is AI, to operate the right thing for you. But it's using a plethora of analytic models in absolute real time, and those models rely on data. And in some cases, even regulations will mean that you might have to explain meaningful insight into the logic involved in that decision. But if you're using an opaque model that really is pulling from many different types of data and using it in different ways that you can't understand, you're not only in violation with that, you're introducing risk into it. So being able to leverage and turn off and on certain models for different use cases, and have that trust and empathy built in the system, I credit Pegasystems for really starting that wave. And now everyone seems to be talking about it, which is the way I think it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean that to me that does seem like the logical approach to give enough control in the system that you can meet your own compliance standards, but also regulatory standards. And as we know, privacy regulations are a mishmash across the world. I mean, GDPR, and you've got California has their own. A lot of states have their own. We don't have a national one yet, but I know in the executive order that the Biden administration put out on AI, that was one of the tenets there is they wanted Congress to take that up and pass a national legislation for privacy across the country to make that consistent. So I'm sure that's a confusing one, and you need the control in the systems to be able to get there, right?
Well, without a doubt. And
Yeah.
it's I think it's a wonderful thing that we're considering having a uniform set of legislation across. You're still going to have differences between states,
Yep.
But they won't be as wildly different now. And you can actually have a system that can better govern that across your processes. And right now, it's very complex, very hard for organizations that are serious about it.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with. I mean, just the changes and how things go. So as we talk about this, I mean, this is an investment in time and it's an investment in money, certainly. What metrics should businesses be looking at? How do they measure the ROI of these investments? And look at how it's improving CX, of course, but how do you make sure you're getting what you wanted out of it?
Well, some of the traditional measures will still apply. You're going to look at, are they clicking? Are they engaging with content that you're producing? Is it converting to a sale? You might even look at the amount of time it takes to convert to a sale. And are you able to service that customer better? So getting to a first contact resolution faster in less amount of
Mhm.
time, lower AHT or average handle time for these sales.
Yep.
But in my mind, I take a step back and say need to be looking at both how we started the conversation around not just efficiency, but effectiveness.
Yeah.
Not just the amount of time that it takes to do something and being more productive and efficient in your processes, which you need to do, but are you more effective? Are you changing the
Mhm.
outcome? And if you work from the outcomes backward and focus on that, I generally always believe you're thinking of the right thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's good. I think a lot of companies today seem like they really focus around productivity, and that's important. I think there are a lot of productivity gains here, but your point of yes, but look at the outcomes and make sure that the outcomes are what you expected. You can do something really fast in the wrong direction, and it's still wrong, right? So
It's very easy to automate the wrong thing at scale.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I sort of felt that way around sales technology for the past few years, that a lot of the sales tech was built to make you do the thing that already wasn't working, only more of it. So
There you have
not
it.
sure if that's a good strategy or not, right? Well, Jeff, thanks for joining again. That's all the time we have today. I mean, I could definitely keep going on this topic for a long time. It's always an interesting one. But before I let you go, the one question I always ask everybody at the end: could you recommend somebody, a thought leader, author, mentor, somebody that's influenced you and you believe that would be beneficial for companies that are thinking about getting involved with AI and generative AI in their customer journey, that they could look at and learn from?
Absolutely. There are frankly a lot of great thinkers out there. The one probably the greatest fan of is Andrew Frank at Gartner. He's been in the
Mhm.
space for a long time, and I've long followed him. And he's the one that is thinking about things such as that brand aspect of where we can
Yep.
apply these types of technologies and things that we could never possibly do before, much less at scale. And I think he's just really just an incredible way of thinking about the opportunities and challenges. And he's also featured, I believe, in a great podcast, which is Gartner Hashtags. And if you're not
Hmm.
following that yet, I suggest you check it out. There are a number of
Yeah.
great thinkers there. Penny Gillespie's there, Ben Bloom, others, and it always gets you thinking in a different way, which I think is great.
Yeah, I do. I think that's great. And that's certainly, in the world we're in, it changes so quickly. It's good to have some source that can kind of help you keep up and keep that in the right context too. So that's great. Thanks. I really appreciate that. So Jeff, thanks for joining today. It's a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Mike. Always great.
Thanks. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining. Remember to hit that subscribe button. And for more on AI and other software research reports and posts, check out the arionresearch.com/blog and /research reports. And don't forget to join us next week. I'm Michael Fawcett, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.